I'm so glad to welcome you to this 2-week course and explain something about its purpose and why it is important. I want you to master certain basic concepts that will keep you from making mistakes and will make you better prepared to talk to those who can lend their support. You can then begin to embark on the fundraising process. I call this first week the 7 myths of fundraising. After we review those myths, you'll have plenty of chance to practice dispelling them. The second week is called 10 Words Every Fundraiser Should Know. So who is this class for? Well, it certainly is for beginners, people who have never fundraised before. But it's also an important refresher course for people who have been fundraising for a while. Sometimes I find myself forgetting a few of these basics of fundraising, and in turn I make mistakes. I return to this material again and again. I keep lists of the points we cover so that I can avoid mistakes and can be successful in my own fundraising. So where should we begin? Let's begin with a definition of fundraising. Fundraising, as we describe it in this course, is the process of soliciting support for a cause, the cause intended to make the world a better place. Let me repeat that just to be sure you understand because it's so important. Fundraising is the process of soliciting support for a cause. So to begin with, fundraising is not about soliciting money for a conventional business enterprise or to enrich investors or company owners or shareholders of an organization. If I run a business that sells clothing in a commercial setting and I need money to build a new showroom, that is not the kind of fundraising we will be talking about. However, if I have an organization that distributes clothing to flood victims and I need money to acquire inventory, that is the kind of fundraising we will be discussing. Do you see the difference? In the first example, the business needs money to become more successful to enrich its owners. In the second example, the organization needs money to help disadvantaged people. So it's important to start by being clear about your cause and how your cause is different from simply raising money for a business venture. Donors will want to know what problem you are trying to address, whom you are serving, and why it is important. They love to hear stories of those you have helped. It will help them understand why giving you money is important. What problems in the world are you trying to solve, and how will you do it? So, what are the myths about fundraising? Myth number 1, fundraising is only about getting cash. Sure, we always think of soliciting money when we think of fundraising, but money is only one of the most obvious forms of support. Support can also come in the form of people donating time, or manufactured goods, or food, or space, or a host of other things that furthers the work of the organization. We use the term in-kind donations to describe those that are not cash. And in the end, aren't you just as successful if you get the things that the cash was supposed to purchase? Here's an example. Anita wants to start a school, and she needs donated temporary space and equipment. She can ask for cash, but receiving donated space, computers, desks, and chairs is also a success, with the same result. In many communities, cash is scarce, but the things cash can buy are not. Remember this important caveat. In-kind gifts are only valuable if you can use them. For example, I've seen situations where food banks have piles of cans of food whose expiration dates have passed, or offices where old surplus computer equipment has been donated but is obsolete. Sometimes a gift will have some monetary value, a painting, let's say, but it will take a lot of time and expense to turn it into cash. I always advise people to solicit in-kind gifts that you need, and to be careful about accepting those that you don't. So what about myth number 2? Myth number 2 is this. Raising money is all about knowing rich people. I've had many students tell me, I can never be a good fundraiser because I don't know people who have a lot of money. Do you have a loving family, I ask? Do you have good friends? If the answer to either question is yes, then you can probably start a fundraising program. But wait, they say, I can't ask people I know and am close to for money. Besides, they don't have much. You have to start somewhere, and you shouldn't expect a lot when you start. Remember, it's about finding supporters, as many as you can, who can spread the word. Each time you find a person who will support you, that person has a family and friends, and the circle can grow. Think about it like a pebble in a pond. When you throw that pebble, they're concentric circles. The closest ones are family and friends, and then people that they know. And eventually those concentric circles get wider and wider until you do meet up with those donors that have a great deal of money who you didn't know at the beginning. For Josephine, it was 2 friends from university who got her project started. For Samuel, it was friends who he met on Facebook. Starting with some simple fundraising event to which you invite family and friends could be a low-risk start. Remember, the more donors you have, the more funding you can get. And the more donors you can find, the more prospects they will lead you to. Eventually, they will lead to the wealthy people you thought you didn't know. Now we come to myth number 3. Myth number 3 is that in fundraising, one person gives and the other receives. Makes sense, right? You ask for money, I write you a check, I give, you receive. In fact, fundraising is a transaction in which each side gives something to the other. In some cases, the transaction is an obvious one. It's an actual purchase and sale involving actual things. For example, Lisa and her group of young people with disabilities are selling their art in exchange for a gift. But at a more abstract level, you're providing something intangible that may be of equal value to donors, such as an opportunity for the donor to participate in an organization that does something special in the world of which he or she wants to be a part. Critical to your attitude when you ask for support is that you are offering a partnership where both sides have something to gain. You're providing something essential to that person's well-being. It builds your confidence when you ask yourself, how can I ask for money? And the answer, I am giving the donor something special. Or at times you may be just giving friendship and an opportunity to belong. Years ago, I used to visit one of my donors when she was in the hospital. During the time she was there, she had temporarily lost her sight and was unable to read. I would often read her articles from the local paper so she could keep up with the news. Some months later, she sent a contribution to my organization with a note. This is a special thank you to Tom for the wonderful attention he paid to me, making my hospital stay a little more bearable. Always think about what you are providing to the donor. Now we come to myth number 4. Myth number 4, you should always try to tell a donor as much about your organization or project as possible. The more you say, the better chance you will have of getting money. But that is simply not true. One of the most basic realities is that most people like to talk about themselves and their own interests. Sure, they will want to know about your organization, but it has to be in the larger context of what interests them. So, a conversation with a donor is a chance to find out as much as you can about them and let them talk. You should be prepared to lead the conversation to areas of their interest by finding out as much as you can about them in advance. Look and listen when you're with the donor, and to the extent possible, follow up on things that they say, leading whenever possible to points of connection with you and your organization and its activities. What is myth number 5? Myth number 5 is when you're making your case to a donor, statistics and facts are the only things that matter. True, they will matter at some point, but it's stories that engage donors. I was attending a fundraiser recently for a school for emotionally disturbed children. After dinner, there was a short film profiling one of the graduates of the school who had come to the school as an adolescent who many people had given up on. But the school provided that child and his family with wonderful guidance and care. The child matriculated into a 4-year college and is engaged in a successful career with a stable family of his own. It was such a moving story, and when the lights came up, the individual himself came to the microphone and said a few words about how the school had transformed him. This was a great example of a compelling story because it highlighted not only how the school helped someone who really needed help, but how their work had transformed that person's life. Donors like to hear success stories like this one, but they also like stories about beneficiaries overcoming adversity even more. Let's compare 2 stories of an organization that encourages empowerment for young women. Lucia is our most successful student. She has excelled in everything. She's an overachiever. Her parents are both physicians, and she wants to continue the family tradition. Johanna is a team leader and counsels other young girls. She's been a wonderful role model and mentor. Her father died when she was 6. Her mother is infected with HIV/AIDS and has an addiction problem. Which story is more compelling? Certainly, it's important for all women to be empowered, but to me, and I think to most donors, the story of Johanna is especially compelling and inspiring because of the difficult circumstances she's dealt with. Now we come to myth number 6. Myth number 6 is that a great fundraiser is an individual superstar and that he or she works mostly alone in achieving success. In fact, fundraising is what I call a team sport. First of all, fundraising is hard work. As the old saying goes, it's 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. And with fundraising, there's much more to do than one person can do alone. And the reason? Well, let's think about it for a moment. There's planning and strategizing. There's prospect identification, both individuals and institutional donors. There's making contact. There's following up and courting donors. There's research. There's the solicitation phase. There's designing materials. There's keeping your website up to date if you have one. There's collecting stories and other materials for fundraising. There's budgeting. There's record keeping, reporting. There's servicing donors and funders, and most important, there's acknowledging when they have given you money or something else. Also, it takes a team effort to constantly enlarge your circle of donors. One person can only do that one donor at a time, but a constantly growing team can do it exponentially. Now, I don't want to scare you. Though there is much to do, you don't necessarily need to have a group of 20 fundraisers to be successful. It's about leveraging the talents that you have access to. If there is someone working within your organization in finance, for example, how can you draw them in and leverage their skills for your fundraising efforts? If someone's good at graphic design, she or he might be helpful in designing your fundraising materials. But like all teams, much time has to be spent on teamwork and coordination, which is why the planning and the strategizing and assigning responsibilities is so important. So if you're just starting out and you're feeling overwhelmed, begin with this step. Your plan does not have to be perfect. You just need to start somewhere. Finally, what is myth 7? Myth 7 is that the internet has completely changed how we do fundraising. While some things have indeed changed, you might be surprised by how many things have not changed at all when it comes to fundraising, even online. You can have a substantial international presence for the cost of a domain name and a website. You can tell people your story anywhere in the world and maintain important relationships with donors immediately without ever having to travel. You can mount a major fundraising campaign without the investment of large amounts of money. But your mission still matters. People still need to be convinced that your work is important. You still need to find donors and cultivate them. True, you may be able to find them on Facebook rather than at a party, but you and your team still need to find donors and get them interested. And remember, from myth 6, all the things you need to do to be successful in fundraising. Most of them matter here too. Planning and strategizing, identifying prospects, following up and courting donors, designing compelling materials, keeping your website up to date, collecting stories, record keeping, reporting, servicing donors, acknowledging gifts. All of these things still matter, even when you're fundraising online. Let's remind ourselves by disposing of the 7 myths and changing them into fundraising truths. Truth number 1, fundraising is about more than getting cash. Donated items that you need, donated labor, or in-kind gifts can be of equal value if you can use them. Second, you don't have to know rich people to be an effective fundraiser. Most people start with family or friends. Truth number 3, fundraising is a transaction in which both sides receive something. Be sure you're clear about what that something is when you ask for money. Truth number 4, listening to donors is often more important than lecturing them. Everyone likes to talk about themselves, and those personal experiences can be linked to the ask. Truth number 5, stories often matter more than statistics to capture people's attention. Truth number 6, fundraising is a team effort. And truth number 7, fundraising via the internet still holds many similarities to in-person fundraising.